Welcome to This Explainer. If you or maybe someone you love have been stuck in that incredibly frustrating, repeating cycle of recovery and relapse, well, first of all, you're definitely not alone. Today, we're unpacking a critical, often missed link between mental health and addiction recovery, bringing some much-needed clarity to exactly why that cycle happens and how modern treatment has evolved to finally solve it. Let's just dive right in with a pretty painful but absolutely necessary question. Why does addiction treatment often fail? Why do so many people put in the agonizing work to get sober, only to find themselves right back at square one? For decades, society told us it was just a lack of willpower, right? A character flaw. But clinical science tells a completely different story. To figure out why, here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll look at the missing piece, define dual diagnosis, examine the dangerous cycle of how these things fuel each other, break down common conditions, and finally look at the integrated solution.
All right, Section 1, the missing piece, the hidden epidemic. Let's start with the immediate pain point. Why do standard treatments leave people feeling so incredibly hopeless?
Well, to put it into perspective, data from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration really validates this struggle. Get this. Of the 21.5 million adults in the U.S. with a substance use disorder, exactly half, 50%, also meet the criteria for an underlying mental health disorder. Half! So if a standard addiction program is only treating the substance use, they're literally only treating half the problem for millions of people. Which brings us to Section 2, defining dual diagnosis, naming the issue. Because if half the people struggling are fighting a two-front war, we need to know exactly what we're up against. So, formally, dual diagnosis, also known as co-occurring disorders, is the simultaneous presence of both a substance use disorder and a mental health condition in the exact same person. And here's the kicker. It honestly doesn't matter which one came first. What matters is that they're both currently present, they actively influence each other, and most importantly, both demand immediate, simultaneous treatment for recovery to actually stick. This quote really hits the nail on the head. Many people entering addiction treatment have undiagnosed mental health conditions that were completely masked by their substance use. Think about that. People are often self-medicating conditions they might not even know they have. So if you take away the substance, but you don't treat that masked mental health issue, the underlying pain simply takes over again. That's exactly why those traditional, non-integrated programs have such disappointing long-term results. Let's move to Section 3, the dangerous cycle, why they fuel each other. To fix this, we really need to understand how these conditions lock together. Addiction and mental illness don't just happen to sit side by side. They interact. It's like a tangled knot driven by three overlapping mechanisms. First up is self-medication, using a substance to numb untreated symptoms, like a trauma survivor relying on opioids. Second is shared neurobiological pathways. And third are substance-induced psychiatric symptoms, meaning prolonged drug or alcohol use actually creates brand new psychiatric issues that wouldn't have existed otherwise. Let's zoom in on that second one, those shared neurobiological pathways, because the biology here is absolutely fascinating. Mental health and addiction actually share the exact same real estate in your brain. They both heavily impact the dopamine system, our stress response circuits, and the prefrontal cortex, the part that manages our decision-making. So say someone with depression self-medicates with stimulants to feel motivated. Sure, it gives a quick fix, but physically, it's rewiring those pathways. It drastically depletes natural dopamine, makes the brain biologically more vulnerable, and ultimately worsens the depression while building a severe physical dependency. This tees up Section 4 perfectly. Common conditions, the culprits. Let's look at what specific psychiatric conditions usually get tangled up with substance abuse. We see a few distinct patterns repeatedly. Major depressive disorder is a huge one. Substances temporarily boost the mood, but eventually crash the brain's natural dopamine. Then there's anxiety. People often use alcohol or benzos just to manage social situations. And bam, a few short years later, it's a severe disorder. PTSD is also heavily linked with opioids and alcohol, especially for trauma survivors, which means they desperately need specialized trauma-informed care. And bipolar disorder? Disproportionately high rates of substance use there too, requiring strict cycle management. Oh, and remember those substance-induced symptoms we mentioned earlier? Prolonged use can actually trigger things like severe anxiety or suicidal ideation during opioid withdrawal. It's an incredibly heavy cycle. So we understand the biology and the culprits. How do we actually untangle this knot? That brings us to our final part, Section 5, the integrated solution, breaking the cycle. It all really comes down to a fundamental shift in medical philosophy. In the past, the standard was sequential treatment. Basically, treat the addiction first, get them sober, and then, maybe address the mental health later. But treating just the addiction sequentially? The medical community now widely recognizes that's completely inadequate. It leaves powerful psychiatric symptoms completely unaddressed, and those become immediate relapse triggers. Instead, we absolutely must use integrated treatment, addressing addiction and mental health simultaneously, right at the same time under the exact same clinical team. Research consistently proves this integrated approach achieves vastly better long-term outcomes.
Let's make this concrete. Looking at iRely recovery out in Los Angeles as an example, here is the roadmap of a successful integrated program. Step 1 is a comprehensive biopsychosocial assessment on day 1, screening for everything, even if you have absolutely no prior diagnosis. Step 2 seamlessly brings in immediate psychiatric support and medication management. Step 3 dives into evidence-based therapies. And finally, Step 4 secures the future with highly structured aftercare planning, fully coordinated with outpatient providers.
Zooming in on that third step, the therapies, it's pretty impressive. Guided by a consulting UCLA addiction psychiatrist, the clinical team uses highly targeted approaches. We're talking cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, which has incredibly strong data for dual diagnosis. Dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT, phenomenal for regulating intense emotions and processing trauma. Plus acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, to tackle those avoidance behaviors driving the addiction. Wrap all of that up in trauma-informed care and motivational interviewing, and you're actually treating the whole complex human, instead of just playing whack-a-mole with symptoms.
Now, I know hearing about all these specialized, high-level psychiatric services probably has you thinking, great, but how on earth do I access that? Well, the really empowering, super relieving news here is that accessible help exists right now. Thanks to mental health parity laws, most major insurance plans are actually required to cover this kind of integrated, simultaneous care. Facilities like iRely Recovery even have care coordinators whose whole job is to seamlessly coordinate this treatment under your specific insurance benefits. You do not have to fight this two-front war alone. And honestly, the resources to fund the right kind of treatment are very likely already in your pocket. I'll leave you with this final thought as we wrap up today's explainer. The human brain is beautifully, frustratingly complex, right? The way our mental health intertwines with our coping mechanisms is deeply biological. So if addiction and mental health are truly just two sides of the exact same coin, isn't it time we stop trying to treat just half the person? To achieve lasting, meaningful recovery, we absolutely must demand integrated treatment that honors the true complexity of the brain. Thanks for joining me today, and remember, recovery isn't just about stopping a habit, it's about healing the whole mind.